If you ask anybody what they know about the Wild West, they would most likely mention Billy the Kid, 6 shooters, Wyatt Earp, Texas, and our topic of today, Saloon. The Wild West Saloon played an integral part in the community of these old Western towns and helped give us Western fans some of incredible stories. Today, we will be discussing the history of the Wild West Saloon. Welcome to Chronicles of Time, a channel that covers both well-known and obscure historical events. If you like what we're doing here, leave a comment, a like, and please subscribe. It really does help the channel. Watering holes are not unique to the Old West, but the saloon does seem to hold a closer connection to the Wild West than other time periods. Let's look back to the beginning and see how we got to the famous saloons of the Wild West. The first place ever actually called a saloon was a place called Brown's Hole that was established near the Wyoming, Colorado-Utah border. Kind of a strange name to call a place where you would have a drink. This saloon was established in 1822 and catered to the large amount of fur trappers in the area. Early saloons didn't always look like the ones we see in a John Wayne movie. A lot of saloons were kind of a pop-up establishment that would be thrown together to take advantage of the large influx of miners, soldiers, and followers of the gold rush. Some of the first Wild West saloons were little more than lean-tos or tents just thrown together. A place where you could strike up a conversation after being on the trail for a few months. A place you could grab a drink and see some entertainment. If the small settlement saw a real population boom, the saloon would obviously make more money and be transformed into something that we're more familiar with in the stories and film. In the early days of the saloon, the main drink was whiskey. Before any regulation of distilling techniques or food quality, the whiskey saloons would serve would be made out of raw alcohol with a little burnt sugar and chewing tobacco for flavor. This helped the drink earn its crazy nicknames such as Tangled Foot, 40 Rod, Bug Juice, Coffin Varnish, Gut Warmer, Red Eye, Neck Oil, and Taos Lightning. The early traders would sell whiskey to Native Americans, and to prove its high alcohol content, the traders would pour some on the fire. This gave us probably the most famous name for whiskey during the Old West, firewater. The cocktail actually was available, but was looked down upon by other Old West men during the time period. If the person was unknown to the saloon or didn't drink their drink fast enough, there are tales of those men being forced to swallow a fifth of 100-proof liquor at gunpoint. Beer was available during the times of the Old West, but was still served a little warmer than we're used to nowadays. This was before refrigeration, and it wasn't until Adolphus Busch, the founder of Budweiser, introduced artificial refrigeration in the 1880s that brought the possibility of cold beer to a saloon near you. Although poker is seen as the most popular game of the time period, it was actually a game named Faro that held the title. Also known as Bucking the Tiger, it was immensely popular during the Wild West and played by all the famous Western personalities that we know and love. Other games, such as Brag, 3-card Monte, and dice games like High-Low, Chuck-a-Luck, and Grand Hazard were also found in saloons around the Wild West. Some of the saloons even became specific for gambling. As population and popularity grew, so did the specific type of saloon. They had saloons specifically for billiards, eating, dance halls, bowling, and hell. Just good old-fashioned drinking saloon. There were even saloons that were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, during the Old West. So, who would you see if you walked into a saloon? Saloons were pretty busy places. It is said that men of the West didn't like to drink alone, or even drink at the house. Regulars were very common in the Wild West saloon. You would also see men from outlaws, to miners, to laborers, and gamblers. You rarely saw minorities in the Wild West saloon. Native Americans were actually prohibited by law to patron a saloon. Respectable women were also excluded from attending the Wild West festivities down at the saloon. There were saloon girls or shady ladies that you could find there. This tradition actually lasted up until World War I, but there are very, very famous madams that had their hand in the shady lady business, such as Maddie Silks, Julia Boulette, Belle Breezing, Fanny Porter, and Dora Dufresne. But we will save their stories for another video. There were also some pretty interesting customs that you would see in a saloon. Men would only ask another man's first name. A lot of times, these characters had some shady backgrounds, and it was considered impolite to be curious about a man's full name. Inquiring about personal business was also looked down on, such as asking a rancher how many cattle he had. Asking questions like that could have you laying face down on Main Street. Another custom was offering the man standing next to you a drink. If a newcomer walked into a bar and didn't offer a drink to the man next to him, he would be asked why he didn't offer. It was also a worse insult to refuse a drink offered to you, regardless of what was preserved. There are stories of people being led from bar to bar at gunpoint to learn some manners. A man could come in and say he had no money, but he needed a drink, and he would most likely have drinks bought for him. However, if he ordered a drink, knowing he couldn't pay for it, he could expect swift justice. When we talk about the look of a saloon, fans usually have a pretty good picture of what to expect. A long bar made of ochre mahogany and polished to shine, brass foot rails to set your favorite pair of boots on, and a spit platoon by your foot to keep your tobacco from hitting the wood floors. Towels were found on the ledge of the bar so you could wipe suds off your mustache. The decor inside would usually depend on the location. If you were in Texas's big cattle country, you might find steer horns with spurs and saddles on the wall. If you lived up in Wyoming or in the Colorado mountains, you might find a big elk mounted on the wall. Hell, it wasn't uncommon to have nude paintings of women hung around as well. Some of the most important moments in Wild West history happened in a saloon. Wild Bill Hickok was shot and killed playing poker at Natal and Mann's Saloon in Deadwood in South Dakota. This famous murder not only took out one of the most important men of the time period, it also created the most famous hand in poker, aces, and eights, the dead man's hand. Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson were involved in multiple saloons and faro dealing throughout the time period. Wyatt Earp actually opened his own saloon in Nome, Alaska. He followed the Alaskan gold rush and opened the Dexter Saloon. It was the first two-story building in Nome, Alaska, and was incredibly popular because of the famous owner. There were 60 saloons in Nome, Alaska, with only 20,000 residents. Wyatt Earp ended up selling the Dexter Saloon for $80,000, which is over $2 money in today's money, and actually settled in Los Angeles. There are saloons still standing to this day that you can actually go visit. Some of these watering holes are the oldest saloons in the country. If you're ever in the area, you can pop in and see meticulously preserved saloons from the Wild West area. These include Saloon No. 10 in Deadwood, South Dakota, the Minger Bar in San Antonio, Texas, which is supposedly home of the most cattle deals in the United States, frequently visited by the founder of the famous King Ranch of Texas. It also served Ulysses S. Grant and Teddy Roosevelt. It is said that Teddy Roosevelt recruited most of his Rough Riders from the Minger Bar in San Antonio, Texas. Next, we have the Buckhorn Exchange in Denver, Colorado, which was visited by Teddy Roosevelt during his hunting trips across Colorado. The Capitol Bar in Socorro, New Mexico, the Crystal Palace in Tombstone, Arizona, visited by Doc Holliday and Virgil Earp. This saloon still has gunmen who reenact shootments while you're there. The White Elephant Saloon in Fort Worth, Texas, is famous for the gunfight between owner Luke Short and Fort Worth Sheriff Longhair Jim Courtright, which we've actually covered on this channel. There are many, many more as well. The saloon is ingrained into American Wild West spirit, whether it's thought of a place that you find your fortune or a pit stop as you travel to find your place in this vast country. So many of our countrymen found their way into these watering holes to expand and explore the United States. If you're ever around one, pop on by and support our Old West heritage. Thank you for watching Chronicles of the Time. I hope you enjoyed more of our Wild West content. Because of the immense feedback we have on the subject, we will be focusing more on the Old West time period. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. Cheers, y'all.